morning, everybody. My name is Bob Cherry, and I'm number 3 of the 3 old guys who have been filling the pulpit for you here at Crossroads. Old guy number 1, and he's preached the most for you, is my hyper friend, Steve Reeves. Do you agree with me on that? He is so hyper. Last September, Steve asked me to preach on the Sunday that he retired. He was retired. He said, Bob, would you come and preach? And I remember it was just 1 year ago. 1 year ago, Steve was proud of the fact that he was an IU fan, and he was extremely clean-shaven, to say the least. Here's a picture of Steve from just last week. Look at that, all right? Now, all of a sudden, he's a Buckeye fan. Go figure, all right? And look at that goatee. It is white. It is white. Do you know why it's white? Because he's old. That's why it's white. And I know he's going to be watching this online. So how you doing, old man? You know, that's what we'll say to him. And then you had old guy number 2, John Russell, who's also a friend of mine, who when I was a freshman at CCU had already graduated, so he's really old. And now you've got me, old guy number 3, who just this year enrolled in Social Security. And today, my oldest daughter's turning 40. You know how that makes me feel? Speaking of old men, did you hear the story of the 3 guys who discovered that they were all born on the same day? They all had the same birthday. So they said, hey, we're all turning 50, so let's go celebrate our birthday together. Where should we go? Let's go to that restaurant down by the river. They've got some really pretty waitresses down there. 10 years later, they said, hey, we're all turning 60 on the same day. Let's go celebrate our birthday together. Where should we go? Let's go to that restaurant down by the river. They've got some really good food there. When they turned 70, they said, hey, it's our birthday. Let's go celebrate. Let's go celebrate together. Where should we go? Let's go to that restaurant down by the river. They've got a new wheelchair ramp down there. And when they turned 80, they said, let's celebrate our birthday together. Where should we go? Let's go to that restaurant down by the river. We've never been there before. All right, I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to grab a piece of paper, all right? You got to have a piece of paper and a pen. Certainly, it's got to be close to you. Because I want you to write something down for me. I want everybody to participate. First of all, I want you to write the year in which you were born. That's pretty easy. And if you want, you can shield your paper so that nobody can see what that year is. And then after you write down your date of birth, I want you to make a little dash. And then at the right of that dash, I want you to write the numbers 20 and then 2 blank spaces, all right? And while you're doing that, I'll do mine up here. All right, I'll just do mine up here. I was born in 1990. I just wanted to see if you were paying attention. All right. No, we won't do that. I was born in 1952. Oh. And I have a little dash, and then I write 20 blank blank. All right? Has everybody done that for me? The year you were born, a little dash, and then 20 blank blank. Now, every single one of us has one of these first dates. Every one of us. For there was a day when you entered this world, and we mark that day, don't we? We call it our birthday, and we celebrate it once a year. My daughter, today. And we all have one of those last dates as well when we leave this world, and we don't like to think about that last date very much. But we all have both of those dates. And when you think about it, we have absolutely no control over the first date. Nobody asked at 9 months if we were ready to be born. Nobody said that. And we don't have a lot of control over that second date either. But in between your first day and your last day, I want you to notice there's that little dash. And what that little dash is going to be like is mostly up to you. So the question I want to ask this morning is, what are you doing with your dash? We only get 1. Nobody gets 2. So what are you doing with your life? Because take it from a 66-year-old, life goes by really, really fast. Do you remember what the brother of Jesus, James, wrote in 4:14, these words? Your life is like the morning fog. It's here a little while, and then before you know it, it's gone. Today is week 1 of a 3-week sermon series entitled Life's Too Short. And today we're going to talk about life's too short to always play it safe. So I got a question for you. What would you say is the most dangerous object in your house? What's the most dangerous object in your house? A guy by the name of Loughton has written a book on risk, and he devotes an entire chapter on household dangers and some of the dangers that he writes about you would probably expect. For instance, 400,000 people a year are injured by kitchen knives. Have you ever been injured by a kitchen knife? Just the other day, I hit my knife. I hit my finger. Manual and power saws account for about 100,000 injuries every year. That doesn't surprise me. Now, some of these dangers did surprise me. You ready for this one? Draperies. Draperies. Every year, 40 people in America are strangled by drapery cords. Go figure. How does that happen? And here's one. Pillows. 4,000 people a year seriously injure themselves on pillows. Of all things, how do you do that with a pillow? Now, I want you to do me a favor. Turn to the person next to you or the person behind you and tell them what you think is the most dangerous object in your house. Go. This is group participation. Turn. Don't just sit there. Look around. And what do you think is the most dangerous object in your house? All right, good. Okay, you can stop. I heard somebody say my wife. That's probably not a good answer, to say the least. Now, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I want to show you what I think is the most dangerous object in your house and in my house. There it is. I think it's the most dangerous object. And this is obviously a chair. It's a special kind of chair. It's called an easy chair or a lazy boy chair. That's right. And we don't buy chairs like this for the way they look necessarily, do we? Oh no, we buy chairs like this for only one reason. And what's that reason? Comfort. Because we all like comfort, right? Every single one of us. I want to try to paint a picture for you of what comfort can do to a life and why it can be so dangerous. And to do this, I'm going to ask Jim Runnels if he'd make his way up here to the front. Where's Jim? Don't be hiding, Jim. Come on, get up here, buddy. All right. Come on up. Go ahead, give him some applause. Give him some love. Sporting a little Buckeye going on here, aren't you? All right, Jim, good. Here's a couple things. Just come right here. I'm going to talk to you a minute. All right. Your job today is to immerse yourself in comfort so that by the time we get finished with this, that everybody will say that you're the most relaxed and comfortable guy ever. Got it?
I'll try my best.
I mean, I think you can do that. All right, so take a seat in the chair. All right, take a seat in that chair. Comfort, just take a seat in the chair. Yep. Don't pull the lever yet. Don't do it. Just sit in the chair. All right, that's all I want you to do. Just sit in the chair. All right, what'd you say? Where's your iced tea? It's coming, so just hold on. We have several things that I think will help to make him comfortable. First of all, take your shoes off.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of bad. Man, it stinks, but that's all right. All right, we have some slippers that have never been worn, hardly. All right, so would you put these on your feet? That'll make you feel really good, Ohio State, that's for sure. Try them on, see if they'll help you relax.
Small.
They're small, but just fake it and put them on. Act like put them on. They look so cute on your feet. Doesn't they look cute on you? I hope somebody's getting a picture of this. That's for sure. Your wife could blackmail you big time here, all right? Now, on the side of the chair is a lever, so I want you to pull that lever. And it's pretty cool, right, if you have a chair like this, because it makes you go back, right? You can lay back, and then your feet kick up. Are you feeling pretty good?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He's a ham, I can tell already. All right, that's good. Now, if you really want to be comfortable, we have certain kinds of food that people tend to eat when they're in chairs like this, and we have a special term for that kind of food, and we call it comfort food, right? Comfort food, all right? So we have, let me see here, we have a donut. Would you like to take a bite of a donut?
Oh, thank you very much.
That's your donut. He's liking this, isn't he? I think I can tell. All right, now I know it's the afternoon. I mean, it's not afternoon, but it's morning. But you can take these home. But we have a bag of chips.
Oh, yeah.
And you said tea, but all we have is Coke. So you want to take a drink of Coke?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Are you doing all right?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
You sure? So this wasn't so bad. You glad you did this?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. And then what's the one thing that we all, when we're sitting in a chair like this, what's the one thing that we all tend to eat at night? Ice cream. That's exactly it. So I hope you like cookies and cream. So that's what we got. You don't want the donut now, do you? You want the ice cream.
Ice cream I didn't like.
You don't like it. So eat your ice cream. So he's just, eat your ice cream. So you're enjoying that. So far, so good? Oh, yeah, he's happy. All right. Now, if you have a chair like this in your home, men, what's the one thing that we have to have in our hand when we're sitting in a chair like this? The remote control. So here you go, buddy.
Oh, yeah.
You got that. So, man, you're loving this, aren't you? DirecTV, that's right. Happy as can be. Now, one last thing to help him really relax. Jim, I want you to close your eyes.
Really?
I'm serious. Close your eyes.
See my ice cream.
Close your eyes. This is an obstinate guy here. Okay, close your eyes. And then Nick is going to help us a little bit here. Nick, would you help us? So close your eyes. And Nick, if you would go ahead with us.
Lullaby and good night. Go to sleep, little Jimmy. Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep, little boy.
Now, I want you to take a long, hard look at little Jimmy. Does this look like a guy who's ready to spring into action? If God were to ask little Jimmy to do a real difficult thing right now, do you think Jimmy's ready? Now, as we let little Jimmy take it easy in the chair, I've got a question for the rest of you. Here it is. Could this be a picture of your life? And some of you are thinking, are you kidding? I'm busy from the time I get up until I go to bed at night. I only wish I had time to sit in a chair. That's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking if you ever sit in this chair or not. I'm asking about your life. And I'm wondering if your life is filled with excitement and fulfillment and purpose, or if your life is more like little Jimmy in the chair. Now, if Jimmy were to stay in this chair for the rest of the service, do you think he'd be able to stay awake? I don't think so. So I'm sorry, Jimmy. You got to go. It's time to go. All right. Would you tell Jimmy thank you for helping us with that? Thanks, man. Thank you. Take your chips. Oh, I'll help you out. Dad, you can come back. Keep this. No, I'll keep the slippers. You get out. You come back up afterwards, and you'll find that donut and that Coke, and that's all for you. All right. I want to tell you what is so dangerous about this chair. And what I think what's so dangerous about it is not the stuff you do while you're in the chair. I think it's the stuff you don't do. It's the relationships you never deepen. It's the people in need that you never serve because you just don't see them. It's the prayers you never pray. It's the races you never run, the battles you were made to fight. It's the great adventure with God that you were made for that you never go on. Friends, I want you to hear me. You were made for more than just life in the chair, for you were made to spend your life in risky partnership with God. Amen. Now, to be God honest with you, I honestly think that I've kind of been in the chair for the past 2 years since I retired as a minister of the church where I serve. Now, I want you to hear me on this. Over the past 2 years, my wife and I, my wife Vicky is here, raise your hand. It's the best thing I've ever did was marry that lady. But the two of us, we have been extremely busy over these past 2 years, and I think it's because when you come from a church where you have a Saturday service and 2 or 3 Sunday morning services every single weekend, now that we have a chance, we're traveling a lot. Past couple of years, we've been to the Caribbean, obviously, in Florida and New England and Arizona. We went to Greece, and I went to Thailand and Cambodia and Malaysia with a backpack on with 3 other guys. We went to Israel just last month. Vicky and I went on a 14-day boat cruise on the Danube from Budapest to Amsterdam. And this coming May, I'm taking my 4th trip to Israel, a country that I believe every believer needs to go visit. It's just amazing. What I'm trying to say is that since I've retired, I have been busy, but the whole time I have had the sense that there is still something that's missing. A few years ago, scientists from the University of California did an interesting study. They took an amoeba, of all things, an amoeba, and they put this amoeba in an ideal environment, ideal amounts of food, ideal amounts of moisture, heating, lighting, so on and so on. I mean, this little amoeba had no problems, no stress, no demands, no challenges. Anybody want to guess what happened to that little amoeba? It died. You know what those scientists concluded from that experiment? That demands and challenges are absolutely essential for growth, and that too much comfort is a lethal thing, not only for amoeba, but also for human beings. And God realized that. And that's why over and over in the Bible, we read of one encounter after another of God challenging people to get up out of their chairs. Now, these encounters are called narrative stories. And what's so amazing about these Bible stories is that the same 5 components run through every one of these stories. So with the time that remains this morning, I'm going to walk you through each of these 5 components. And I'm just going to tell you straight up that my goal for this sermon this morning is to get you up out of your chair. Do you hear me? That is my goal, to get you up out of your chair. First component of every narrative story is what's called the initial call. Almost every story in the Bible begins with God asking somebody to do something. Now tell me, how often in the Bible does God interrupt somebody's life and ask them to do an easy job and ask them to do a comfortable job? Anybody want to guess? Never. There's a whole chapter in the Bible, the 11th chapter of Hebrews, that just proves this. God comes to Noah, it says, and says, I want you to build an ark in the face of ridicule and to restart the whole human race on earth. Do that. God comes to Abraham and he says, I want you to leave everything that's familiar to you, go to a far country, and then remember at the age of 99, I want you to have a son and start a family. I hope he doesn't ask that of me, but that 99, start a family. God comes to Moses and he says, I want you to leave your comfortable life here in Midian, and I want you to go back to Egypt where you're wanted for murder and defy Pharaoh. Friends, God never calls us to a comfortable life. And the writer of the New Testament book of Hebrews emphasizes this fact just over and over again. Listen to these verses. Well, how much more do I need to say? It would take too long to recount the stories of faith of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah and David and Samuel and all the prophets. By faith, these people overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what God had promised them. They shut the mouths of lions, quenched the flames of fire, and escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back from the dead. But others trusted God and look, were tortured, preferring to die rather than to turn from God and to be free. They placed their hope in the resurrection to a better life. Some, look at this, were mocked and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in dungeons. Some died by stoning, and some were sawed in half. Others were killed with the sword. Some went about in skins of sheep and goats, hungry and oppressed and mistreated. They were too good for this world. They wandered over deserts and mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. After reading these verses, how high of a value would you say that God places on making sure people who follow Him live comfortable lives? Not much. You see, the God of the Bible is concerned about every one of us, and He wants us to grow, and He wants us to be strong, and He wants us to be filled with courage. And He realized that those things would never happen if we were comfortable all of the time. Hear me. God does not call us to that which is easy. God calls us to that which is difficult. And that's the first thing that happens in each of these stories. God comes, issues a call, and the majority of the time He does so by stirring something deep within our souls. He just does that. And then secondly, there's always an initial response from the person that God has called. Those of you who know your Bible, when God gives somebody a hard assignment, how often does the person say back to God something like this? What a great opportunity. Defy Pharaoh, spend the night in a lion's den, walk into a fiery furnace, marry a woman who says she's pregnant but still a virgin, face floggings and chains and prisons. Fabulous. What a great challenge. Can I supersize it? Almost never in the Bible do people respond to God like that. Instead, their initial response is what? Fear. Fear. Sometimes it's the fear of inadequacy. God comes to Gideon and He says, I want you to save my people from their enemy, the Midianites. I want you to be the guy who leads them into battle. And Gideon says, but Lord, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the least in my family. I'm just not adequate to do this, God. Sometimes it's the fear of failure. Scouts are sent out to explore the promised land, and when they come back, 10 of them say, do you remember? 10 of them said, we can't do it, we're going to fail, we can't do it. And the classic story is God calling Moses and how Moses says no to God 5 times. 5 times in a row, he comes up with an excuse as to why he's not going to get up out of the chair. I mention this because sometimes people say things like, God would never ask me to do something I'm afraid to do. God would never ask me to do something I can't handle. Friends, in the Bible, when God calls somebody to do something, almost every single time, the initial response is fear and a sense of inadequacy. Almost every time. In 1977, I was in graduate school at Cincinnati Christian University, and I was preaching at a little church outside of Cincinnati when the chaplain of the Louisville, Kentucky Police Department called me and said that the association in Louisville wanted to plant a church in the northeast section of Louisville, and they wanted Bob Cherry to lead it. And then he said, I need to tell you, there's not a lot out there, but one day we think that area is going to pop. And by the way, he said, to be up front with you, we have no people, we have no building, and the salary is $11,000, but we think you're the guy. Are you interested? What do you think my first reaction was? Are you sure you called the right person? I was 25. I'd only been preaching part-time for a couple years, and here's this guy asking me to come and plant a church in my hometown. It was just way out of my comfort zone. And so you know what I told him? I said no. But then a couple days later, after praying and talking to my wise wife, I called him back and I said, hey, will you tell me more? And friends, the rest is history. 38 years I was the minister. 38 years I was the minister of Northeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. And when I retired, the church was averaging 3,000 in attendance. And I almost, hear me, I almost blew that opportunity because I was afraid. Anybody here today have a challenge in front of you right now? A course of action? A road that if you walk down, it would cause you to stretch and grow, but you're afraid to do it? Hear me, you be real careful about saying no. Because there's a good chance that God is in that challenge. And let me say this, if you're not facing any big challenges right now, if it's been a long time since you've been fearful, it's possible that you've been in this chair a little too long. Friends, I have never known anyone who had a deep, risky, bold faith that lived an easy, comfortable, challenge-avoiding life. Not one person. So God calls, and almost always people are fearful. And then the next component in all of these stories is that God gives a promise and He offers reassurance. This is so strong. You know, God never says, oh, I can see where this might be pretty scary for you. Oh, okay, never mind. I'll go get somebody else. God knows we get fearful. He knows that. That's why He makes a promise. Do you remember what He promised Gideon in Judges 6:12? Lord is with you, mighty warrior. And to Joshua, He said these strong words, have I not commanded you? You be strong and you be courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. Why? Look at this. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. I promise, God says, I will be with you. And I'm not asking any of you to do this alone. So come on, get out of the chair and join me in this great adventure. Let's do this together. I promise I'm going to be with you the whole time. It's a promise. So God calls, we're either afraid or we feel inadequate. God promises, I'll be with you. And then there's the fourth component, which is to make a decision. You got to decide. Am I going to say yes or am I going to say no to God's call on me? My dad was a daredevil because he was a daredevil, he expected his two sons to be daredevils. So my dad would always push us all the time to try new things. My brother thought it was great. I didn't like it that much, all right? I remember one time when he walked me up on the high dive and then he said, jump. Remember that, some of you? Another time he walked me up on this high cliff overlooking a lake and he said, jump. And both times I remember crying, no, Dad, I don't want to jump. I am afraid. And in his firm way he insisted, Bob, come on, you're 18 years old. Jump. And so I jumped, and both times when I hit the water and I came back up, it was one of the most exhilarating experiences ever. You talk about feeling fully alive. Chair people never feel fully alive. Because chair people can't make up their mind whether they're going to jump or not. Hear me, when God calls you, what matters is not that you feel fear or that you feel inadequate, because you will. What matters is whether you say yes or no to God. So let me ask this morning, what high dive or what ledge is God asking you to jump off of? For me lately, he has been saying to me, okay, you have relaxed a little bit and you've gotten to travel, but now, Bob, it is time for you to get back in the game. Come on. And so I've started to sense a calling from God that I'm supposed to do something with young people, like that little girl. No, I'm kidding. I'm supposed to do something. I'm supposed to do something with and I love little kids, so that doesn't bother me at all. All right. I'm supposed to do something to work with younger guys, and I don't know if that means guys who are in ministry or guys who are in the business world. I haven't figured that out yet. But I do want to show you a chart that God recently used to get my attention. I hope you can read this. People born between 1927 and 1945 are called the builder generation. And look at this. 65% of that generation are what we would call Bible-driven Jesus followers. And I know that you've got a few people from that generation here at Crossroads. They are faithful people, faithful people. 65%. And then there's my generation, the boomers, people born from 1946 to 1964. Look at this. 35% of my generation are Bible-driven Jesus followers. And then you go to the Buster generation, Generation X, 1965 through 1983. And this generation is about 16% Bible-driven Jesus followers. Are you seeing a trend here? And here's the stat that got my attention. The Bridger generation, or millennials, or whatever you want to call them, born 1984 to the present day, and I know there's other names we could call them, but born from 84 to right now, this generation, look at this, 4% Bible-driven Jesus followers. 4%. And it's that last percentage that has just grabbed my heart. We have got to reach that generation, and it's my sense that that's what God is calling me to do. But that's me. What is it for you? What is it that God is calling you to do? What ledge is He asking you to jump off of? Perhaps He's been whispering that now's the time for you to go heal a family relationship that's been broken for years and you're petrified. You know you need to do it, but it's just so messy to go there. Or maybe God's calling you to a different job, a different vocation, but you keep holding back on that. Maybe you're holding on too tight to your money right now because you'd like to buy a very expensive chair. You want a comfortable life. And yet God is calling you to give some of your money away, but you're afraid to let it go. For some of you, it could be a secret sin, and you're scared to death that somebody's going to find out. You know you need help, but getting help is just a scary thing to do. For some of you, maybe your marriage is rather stagnant, and God is nudging you to have a courageous conversation, perhaps with your husband or your wife. And for some of you, the vast majority of you, God is saying, listen, I have been trying to get your attention for years. When are you going to start doing something significant in your life for me? When are you going to start using the talents and the abilities that I have given you for my kingdom? I have a pastor friend whose father was a hard-charging, A-type personality. I mean, this guy was something. Ran his own company, flew his own plane, and more than once sailed his sailboat across the Atlantic. Now, type A. And yet this hard-charging man, when he heard about a mentally handicapped facility near his house, sensed God's calling and knew that he had to do something about it. So he went to the director and he asked if he could hold a church service on Sunday afternoons, and he added, I'll take care of all the expenses. So he found a preacher and he found a piano player. And every Sunday, these people who had pretty much been forgotten got to sing the old hymns and hear a Bible talk. My friend said, I remember as a little boy, my dad, my strong dad, leaving our house every Sunday afternoon at 2:30 to go set up chairs. And here's the part I'll never forget, when my friend said, and my dad did it every Sunday for 30 years. For it was his God-given calling. My daughter, my oldest, who's having a birthday today, lives in Chicago. Unfortunately, but that's where she lives. She was telling me about my grandson and how he had a new neighborhood friend, and neighborhood friend, little boy's name was Jake. My daughter said, Dad, I was a little surprised because 6 months ago, Paul kept saying, Jake is mean, Jake is mean, Jake is mean. And now, Dad, Paul's playing with Jake almost every single day. And my daughter said, so I questioned Paul, and I said, but I thought you said Jake was mean. And Paul said, but he's changed, Mom. With that, my daughter called Jake's mom, and she said, since our boys are playing together, I'd love to meet you. Well, the next day, my daughter's doorbell rang, and it was Jake's mom, who, come to find out, attends the same church as my daughter. With that, this mom proceeded to tell my daughter that Jake and his two sisters were foster children who this lady and her husband have felt a call from God to adopt. And so my grandson was right. Jake had changed because for the first time in his life, he had stability and he had somebody who loved him. Could it be that some of you in this room have sensed that same calling to get involved in foster care or even adoption? Who knows? This is a picture of Rita Logston. Rita attends, we have two campuses, attends a smaller campus in Louisville. And recently, Rita sensed the calling that she was to build friendships with her neighbor. Rita said, I've lived on the same cul-de-sac for 20 years, and I'm embarrassed to say, but I barely know my neighbors. So Rita decided to throw a block party. And the first thing she did was she went door to door and invite every neighbor to the party. And guess what? Every single person came. Every neighbor came. And when the party ended, they all wanted to know if they could do it again. Could God be calling you to do a block party? Last night I was able to sneak in here. I wanted to see what the facility looked like. And by the way, excellent. I love your facility. It's awesome. You should be proud of this facility. But as I was walking around, I went over by the coffee shop and I noticed how nice it looked. But then I noticed this little sign that said the coffee shop is closed because we don't have enough team leaders. And I thought to myself, I wonder how many of you perhaps God is calling to be a team leader and to get that coffee shop back open. Could God be calling you to do that? And so I just want to stop and say, what do you think God is calling you to do? Because He calls us all. What is He calling you to do? And friends, let me tell you why this matters so much. And it's the final component of all these narrative stories. It's the most important. It's that they always end up being the story of a changed life. In the Bible, every time somebody says yes to God, their world changes a little bit. There is a great story in Acts chapter 4 about two of Jesus' disciples named Peter and John who courageously kept telling people about Jesus after He had ascended into heaven. And the authorities, they didn't like it one bit, and so they tried everything they could to get Peter and John to shut up. But Peter and John just would not stop talking. So let's pick it up in verse 13. The members of the council were amazed when they saw the boldness of Peter and John, for they could see that they were ordinary men who had no special training, no status, no impressive education, no degrees after their name. They also recognized them as men who had been with Jesus. Friends, every time you say yes to God, you change a little. Your faith gets a little deeper, your courage gets a little stronger, and you know what else happens? Your heart starts to grow. Now, unfortunately, sometimes in these Bible narratives, people say no to God. And immediately I think of the story of the rich young ruler. A young man who was sincerely interested in what Jesus taught. So do you remember? Jesus issued a call to him and said, I want you to go and sell everything you've got and give it to the poor. Just give it away. Then come back to me with empty hands. And when you do that, you and I will go on a great adventure. It'll be unbelievable. People will be provided for, and your growth will go right through the roof. So let's do it. Come on. The Bible says the rich young ruler just stood there in Jesus' presence for I don't know how long. And he thought about what Jesus had asked him to do. But he had a lot of money. He had a lot of power. He had a really nice chair. And he didn't want to leave it. So he said no. And he walked away. You know, I wonder sometimes what happened to that guy. It may be that he lived to be a really old man. And I bet that everybody thought he was a terrific success, very respected, very wealthy, had a lot of strength, quite religious, and yet nobody knew that when his great chance came and Jesus offered him a call of a lifetime, he wouldn't get up out of the chair. You see, either way, when you get called by God, you're never quite the same. It's real important that you know this, friends. Because when you say no, when God asks you to do something and you say no, here's what happens. Your heart gets a little colder, your faith gets a little weaker, and you get more addicted to the chair, and it gets a little less likely that you'll ever get out of it. You've probably never heard the name Henrietta Mears, but she was one of the greatest risk takers of the 20th century. Single woman, terrible vision, devoted most of her life to teaching kids in a church in California. She was frustrated about not being able to find good material to help her students learn more about the Bible. So she started writing and printing her own stuff, and it was so helpful that people kept telling her she needed to make it available to other children in other churches. So as a result, Gospel Light Publishers started up in her garage. She wanted a retreat area where kids could get out of LA and go and listen to God. In the 1930s, she found an area that would be perfect way up in the mountains, but the price was really high, $350,000 in the middle of the Depression, and besides, the owner was not interested in selling. So Henrietta started to pray, God, give me the mountain. She asked other people to pray, saying, you have to dream big where God is involved, and so they prayed for a long time. God, give us the mountain. God, give us the mountain. God, give us the mountain. They ended up getting the property for $35,000. She built a retreat center there called Forest Home Christian Center, where a whole generation of Christian leaders were developed and mentored by this single middle-aged woman. Listen to this list. Dick Halverson, who would go on to become chaplain of the United States Senate, was one of her students. Bill Bright, who built a huge worldwide ministry called Campus Crusade for Christ, was one of her students. Billy Graham said of her, Henrietta Mears was certainly one of the greatest Christians I have ever known. He said apart from his mom and his wife, no woman ever had a stronger impact on his life than Henrietta Mears. And if you go to Forest Home today, you'll find a place around the lake where 70 years ago, in a great crisis in his life, after a lengthy conversation with Henrietta Mears, Billy Graham knelt down and he prayed, Father, for the rest of my life, I will preach the Bible and its simple truth. That's unbelievable. I'm telling you, no one person produces many leaders that shaped the church in the 20th century like this single middle-aged woman. And I'm telling you all this because I want you to know one thing. When she was on her deathbed in the hospital and facing her last day, somebody asked her, if she had her whole life and she could do it all over again, what would she do different? Would she do anything different? And Henrietta Mears, looking back at all the lives she touched, the risks she had taken, the bold prayers she had prayed, and all the things that she had done for God, she looked at it all. And on her deathbed, she said, I wish I had trusted Christ more. If I had it all over to do again, the one thing I'd do different is I would trust Him more. Listen to this. I wish I had prayed riskier prayers. I wish I had asked for bigger mountains. I wish I had taken bigger risk. And I wish I had trusted Him more. Friends, one day you entered this world. One day you're going to leave it. I don't know when, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe not for a long time, but that day's coming, so don't pretend like it's not. And then between your first day and your last day is the only life you'll ever live. So what are you going to do with your dash? For God's sake, get out of the chair.